Hello, my name is Sara Brown, and I've been doing research on the impact of educational television viewed in childhood on college students under the supervision of Dr. David Saarnio. Did you ever watch Sesame Street? What about Blue's Clues? Any other educational programming? Did those shows seem educational at the time, or were they just fun for you to watch? What do you remember from those shows? If you have kids of your own, did they ever watch educational programming? Do you think the shows are beneficial, or are they just glorified babysitters? Parents often find themselves concerned about their children's television viewing habits, and this is for a few reasons. One being the more time kids spend watching television, the less time they're spending on academic endeavors. And two, research has indicated that television viewing in childhood can increase violence in children. But what about academic and social benefits? Television, mostly educational television, but sometimes other children's programming too, does have the capacity to provide both academic and social benefits. So research has been done on the short-term effects of viewing educational programming, and that has indicated that it can be beneficial in the short term, but not much has been done on the long-term effects. So if watching educational programming as a child can have positive immediate effects on that child, both cognitively and socially, how does viewing that programming as a child impact those dimensions down the line in, say, college students? To try and answer this question, I looked at the perceived effects of children's educational programming in college students. Specifically, I looked at what they remember from what they watched and how they feel what they watched impacted them on both cognitive and social dimensions. So to give you a better picture of what I looked at, here's just a few examples of some items. One of the open-ended items was list the 3 educational programs you viewed most often as a child, and another was to indicate how many hours a day you watched educational programming as a child. I asked these things to kind of get an idea of what they were watching and the conditions in which they watched it. There were items in the survey asking participants to rate the extent to which they agreed with those items on a 5-point scale, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So the first group of these rated items asked participants to indicate the extent to which you believe the educational programming you viewed as a child taught you things like reading skills, musical skills, the importance of helping others, and how to recognize and work through your emotions. I asked them these things to touch on both the cognitive and social dimensions, and to see what sorts of things they were remembering from what they watched. The second group of rated items asked participants to indicate to what extent you believe the educational programming you viewed as a child featured things like characters who care about one another, moral lessons, opportunities for viewers to engage in the program and answer questions. I asked those things to see how they're remembering some of the more common elements of children's educational programming. And participants were asked to what extent do you believe the educational programming you viewed as a child has benefited you cognitively, socially, and overall, from kindergarten to their current collegiate status. I asked them those things to see how they feel about the programming as a whole, rather than just focusing solely on the independent items. So participants were asked to list the 3 shows they viewed most often in childhood, and what show they felt was the most beneficial to them. The top 5 shows given for both of those questions were Dora the Explorer, The Magic School Bus, Barney and Friends, Blue's Clues, and Sesame Street, with Dora the Explorer being the top show given for both questions. Participants indicated that the programming they viewed in childhood did feature the common elements of educational programming, like moral lessons, those things I mentioned in a previous slide. And in terms of our rated cognitive and social domain items, our top 5 highest scoring items were the importance of helping others, how to get along with others, problem-solving skills, that actions have consequences, and how to cooperate with others. There weren't any items that participants didn't agree that they had learned or seen in what they watched as a child, but there were some items that hovered in the neutral range. Those were how to deal with loss and how to deal with racism and discrimination, which was kind of surprising to me. Participants felt that they were impacted positively on the individual cognitive and social domains, and overall as well. However, participants rated themselves higher on being benefited cognitively than they did socially. I think this is interesting because the majority of the top 5 items I mentioned on the last slide were from the social domain. So what does all this mean? Let's go back and think about how we began, with parental concern about television habits and whether or not television is just a glorified babysitter. Turns out that television can in fact be beneficial in the long term, so much so that certain aspects of the programming viewed in childhood are being remembered all the way into college. This is important in the quest to determine the extent of media's effects on development, and I intend to use the knowledge gained from this study for further research on exactly that. Here is some contact information if you have any questions, and these are the references. Thank you so much for your time.